Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Azu. And I am Azuka. I've got
Azu.
the man.
Genius.
Yeah, and today we have a very interesting conversation. One that I'd likely, if I were to be the writer, I would have termed it as stating the obvious. You know, when I read this piece a few minutes ago, it struck my heart. It felt like it was Cupid's arrow. You know, first time I fell in love. But this one, I fell in love with this piece.
Maybe it had to do with the Valentine's season.
Obviously. But this one went straight to my heart. You talked about the cost of living crisis, and you gave a very personal story. And I'm like, if the elephant is talking like this, what will happen to the grasses?
Thanks very much for having me once again, Azu and Julius. It's a pleasure to be here. And the cost of living crisis that folks face, I think for every family and everyone, it's a personal story. And I have seen different dimensions and different aspects of it reported and shared. And I thought perhaps it might be useful to share my own experience from a very, very personal point of view. And I think that's what it's all about. So that, because sometimes when we all dressed up and look good, people don't imagine that folks, as they say, that the rich, also I don't know cry. Whether I qualify to be so described, that they also cry. So perhaps I thought that I should be able to, that I should share something that is relatable. Just see how that connects with folks.
We've moved from a time when a penny could fetch you a basket of goods to a time where a basket of pennies maybe just fetches you an item. And we really progressing as a human society.
There's Bob Marley's song that I love a lot. One of the lines of the song, I think it's from Time Will Tell, that it says something like, every man thinks his burden is the heaviest. And I think that every generation sort of feels that way.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who likes to think that, the past, just get lost in the past and think that the past was always better than the present, because I think every society sort of revolves on it because it's made. Of course, there was also a time when Peugeot in Nigeria, used to cost it. The brand new Peugeot would cost about 5,000. I think that the challenge of today and in most societies is about how to deal with inflation. That's really been a major problem. And that has...
population, perhaps?
And inflation, especially in light of increasing population in some countries of the world. Because some countries of the world are also having to deal with declining adult population, declining... But parts of the world, especially in developing countries, have to deal with the twin problem of inflation and also exploding population. So that has impacted the quality of life that people experience, and led to the sort of situation that you described, where you have loads of money in your pocket, and it seems that even that basket of money can only just fetch you. But I'm sure that there will be people who will say, just give me the money first. Yeah. And then let me determine whether it's large enough to buy whatever I can, because it does appear now that neither the money nor the services really you can't seem to get either of both. But it's a very difficult time for folks out there. I think that progressively, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, things have really gotten pretty much worse. I wouldn't say that the past, everything about the past is far better than... Of course, there are positive things that are happening, things we have to be thankful for. But it's been a very tough, rugged, difficult journey for most folks out.
Okay, so I personally loved this article. I think it's one of my favorites that you've ever written. And you've written a lot of favorites. So the particular part that I like to look at pick the fun side out of everything. But if there's anything that I could relate to, was the cultural part where you talked about, titled men, you can't serve me with one piece of meat. And now at the back of my head, I'm thinking, there might be an upsurge of domestic violence, because in light of everything that's happening in the country, a lot of people are angry, a lot of people are upset, and we all know about the increase in crime rates and all of that. Right. But the truth is, going forward, I mean, you're not an economist, but you have an idea. How do you think we can come out of all of this? Aside from everybody doing, okay, we're trying to motivate ourselves out of the problem. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're correct. I'm not an economist, so I would not even worry to go into the nitty-gritty of policy and all of that. But I think that there are dimensions, and even in the midst of such adversity, I think it's possible for us to try to find a way out. And, I think a good place to start with then to look at what options are available, especially in terms of the foods that we consume or the services that we use. I think that, well, they say the best things in life are free. There are things that we used to take, a lot of things that we used to take for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, like you talked about, folks feeling entitled to having 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of meat in a bowl of soup. But then when you look at the content of that soup, you find that what actually nourishes may just be very little of those things. So you have to then ask yourself about value. So this is not a time to deal. This is a time to deal more with value than about price. We are a society that is so much in love with price. So when they say something costs X amount, especially if it's big, we all fall in love with it. But we are not so concerned about value, about the value of what you have bought and how it can nourish you with its food, or how to maintain, if it's something that you have bought, how you can maintain it. All right. So those are areas I think folks need to look at a bit more closely. How to deal with asking yourself value. So if you have a pot of soup, what are the things that will really nourish you? Maybe some vegetables, some fruits that you can find may do you far better and give you far more nutritional value than your pot of filled with beef and pomo and all of those things, so that you can have it, And also in terms of the things that you use, the things that you have, and options that you have. So perhaps also maintaining the things that we have, paying a little more attention to maintaining the things that we have, cleaning them up, maintaining them. That can also take you much farther than having to replace everything. I've had a car for God knows how long, and I've done the best I can. If you actually see it, you think it's maintenance. All right. So those are areas I think we need to begin to pay a bit more attention to. Yes.
Directly arising from your story, your cashew nut seller cited the exchange rate.
Yes.
If you go to the market, person who is selling gari, person who is selling beans, person who is selling tomatoes or groundnuts or whatever, and talking about the exchange rate. It doesn't add up. These things are not imported.
You are correct. I mean, but there's a sense in which, today the world is far more connected than it used to be. So whatever impacts one part of the world will almost certainly have multiplier effects across the world. The war between Russia and Ukraine, for example, has had a severe impact on not just on the supply chain, but on the prices of grain, even though we are not directly involved in the war. And it's worse for countries that are consuming nations, right? Countries that virtually consume everything from toothpicks to, what have you. So that really is a challenge. So when my cashew nut seller was talking about, you need to go around this country and find out where exactly is cashew nut produced. You'll be surprised to find that some cashew nut that we produce, some of it is imported.
Yeah.
And then some of it is produced locally, but there's probably isn't enough. And even those that are produced locally, the people who produce it will depend on electricity. They depend on maybe on diesel. They depend on. So these are factors that will totally then impact the price of what. So that is when that connection is made by most ordinary folks, like everything dollar has gone up. It's also a reflection of the consumption pattern of it. We virtually consume everything, and until we then begin to invest or consume more of what we produce and produce what we yes, we that problem will always be there. That linkage between our country and our currency and the dollar.
Okay, in Kano, again, from your story, people are already competing with consuming what is supposed to be feedstock for animals,
Yeah.
fishery, and all of
Yeah,
that.
that's
And the situation was that bad. Just yesterday, the president had an emergency meeting where he said there will be no price control and that there will be no importation of foods and all of that. Do you think we're in a dangerous place?
I think we're in a very difficult place. And what sort of complicates that also is the insecurity, because most folks cannot access their farms as they'd like to. So that is also a serious problem. Because if farmers cannot go to farm and therefore access, you will not have the supply to consume. So that is a serious problem. And of course, there's also the more global dimension that is climatic, that has to do with global warming and all of that, and its impact on weather and weather changes and all of that, and how that affects the food supply chain. So those are challenges that folks will, by the way, there is one something that I just took interest in lately. They call it is it acha or something like that? What's
Okay, yes. Mustard seeds.
Yes,
Chai
some
seeds.
just that
Acha.
they used to call it poor man's rice or some poor man's,
Yeah.
but it's quite nutritious.
Very, very.
Exactly. So that when I talk about looking for options and looking for, these are some of the areas that folks may just need to. It's a very, very difficult time for folks out there. But perhaps if we begin to get the security situation right, and also we begin to deal with issues. We talked about population control. I mean, we also, because there's a limit. If your GDP is growing at less than 3%, and your population is growing at about 4, 5, 6%, that's a big time bomb, waiting to explode. So it's actually a combination of factors that we must look at to be able to get a grip on the direction of growth.
Now, one last question from me.
Yes.
The Emir of Kano did warn the First Lady, and call it a warning for want of a better word. The Sultan has been warning about danger, and I think we also need some positive vibe from people like you who connect with it, who lead in opinion formation. Nigeria, what is happening right now is not peculiar to Nigeria, or is it?
No, it's not. I think it was also a point that I made in my article. In fact, if you look at the statistics, the first 10 countries that lead in food inflation in the country, beginning from Senegal right down the ladder, Nigeria is not even there. But of course, we are inching there closely, because we are now heading towards about 30% in terms of
Inflation or food inflation?
Yes, in terms of headline inflation. And then of course, food inflation is worse. It's also part of the fallout, as I said in my article, of the COVID-19 and the supply chain crisis that created, and also a fallout, I believe, of the climatic changes, and then the insecurity and enough. So, but misery loves company, and and honestly, it's not the sort of company that we are pleased to keep. But part of the duty of leadership is also to take responsibility to because trust is also broken.
Yeah.
So, but people need to see evidence. They need to see signaling that the government itself, when you are asking citizens to tighten their belt, when you are telling them to brace for the difficult times, they need to see that you are doing exactly what you're preaching. That, I think, would be some of the sort of signaling, the sort of message that the government will, at this very difficult time, be to send across.
Okay, so in conclusion, you talked about it finally hitting home. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But a lot of things are also going to hit home in the coming days. I hate to be a prophet of doom, but I definitely know the inflation will increase. Dollar used to be, beginning of this week, dollar was about 1,005.
As we speak, I think it's 1,610 or
1,610.
Yes, as we speak.
And we don't know what will happen when we check in a few minutes. And everything just seems to be unstable. Pockets of protest, just here and there.
Mm-hmm.
There's the social media banter, being regional. Oh, you have not seen this, you have not seen that. And then there's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to really address. the subsidy, which will likely be pulled out of electricity very soon. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
So, but my question basically is, what will you say to the average Nigerian in conclusion? Because, like I said, if the elephants are feeling it, what will happen to the grasses?
Well, I think I would need as much advice as the average Nigerian because I do not know whether I'm not part of the average Nigerian at the time that we speak. But I think that there's a way in which we also have to remember that adversity, as they also say, is of necessity also sort of there's a way that makes you far more inventive than you are. So, and it's not only about physical invention; it's also about really rethinking one's entire lifestyle and then making changes that you deliver. Instead of living with your heads in the cloud or your head in the cloud, you really have to come down to earth. And then do things more because there are things that give you value other than just because you want to be like the Joneses. So my advice would be that hope is a very scarce commodity these days. But I would recommend that we should keep hope alive.
Yeah.
And do the best as we can as media to keep holding leaders accountable, hoping that other voices will also amplify this point. And I think there's a future.
Okay.
And these are tidbits from our column today, Conversation with Azu, which was aptly titled Cost of Living Crisis, Azu's Personal Story. For more on this, visit our website, azuishekwene.com, and follow our social media handles, like, subscribe, and share our content. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming, Azuka.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks very much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.